The session is called Using Technology to Unite Project Teams, Revolutionizing CRE Development and Innovation. Our speakers are Jim Barrett, Cory Brugger, and Eric Brody. Welcome to the stage.
Are you guys sitting waiting for me? Don't look so excited, guys. All right. Do you need me? You want me to use that mic? I'm going to stand here. That's all right. All right, welcome, everybody. Did you do any intros? What did I miss? All right, well, I'm Eric Brody. Thank you guys for coming to hang out. I think the subject matter we're going to discuss is near and dear to my heart. I'm a real estate developer here in New York City for the last 20 years. Recently got into the tech space after Rona hit, wondering why some of these projects weren't working. Took a deep dive into it. Started a podcast based on the fact that we had issues translating from these incredible technologists down to the construction and development guys, how the world was changing around them. And we've gotten blessed today to be sitting with two people who will assist us in actually explaining how that world is changing. So I'd like to introduce my guests. First we have, which I think is absolutely incredible, because I can't last anywhere more than 30 days. And this young man has lasted 30 years at Turner Construction. In addition to that, he is the Chief Technical Officer, as well as, I'm thinking I should call him professor. He's a professor at Columbia University as well. Let's give a warm welcome to James Barrett. You ever have an intro like that, James? Or this is relatively typical for you? What's that?
The young man part.
The young man, you know? Next we have a young man also. Now, this guy works at an architectural firm since he hasn't worked there since 1940, has existed since 1939. He looks quite young. He's aged quite well. My father was an architect, right? And if you know a little bit about the architectural business, it usually expands and contracts with the markets, right? You got jobs, you're hiring guys to design, and when you don't have jobs, you're getting rid of them. Well, this firm expanded nationally and is now international. So when we talk about the architectural firm, he is a chief technological officer of an international architectural firm where his responsibility is incorporating and bringing that technology to an older business. So I'd like to introduce Cory Brugger, unless I butchered your name, let me know if I pronunciated it right, at HKS, this international firm. Let's give him a hand. So, when I say that we are blessed to be here, these young men are actually changing the game, right? They're the ones who are dealing with international conglomerates trying to incorporate tech to see what works and what doesn't work. So we put a list of questions together. Obviously, we'll get to you guys as well, to just talk about, one, how you get tech into these businesses, how they're changing the game, and what they see the future impact will be. So I'm going to hit them with a bunch of questions. You guys take some questions for at the end, and let's see what we find out, all right? So basically the name of the panel, Using Tech to Unite Project Teams. But I also want to get into how it's also impacting design and construction and the execution of those projects. So first, guys, and feel free, both of you, to jump right on and answer any of these questions. What do you think are the current hindrances to companies adopting tech in construction, design, and development? Who wants to attack it first?
I'll do mine in case I'm going to be in the shadow. So,
you got a mic,
I would say, there
it
we go.
is.
So, there's a lot of contributing factors. I would say one thing I've run into the most, and I think it's most significant obstacle and not insurmountable, but hard to surmount, is actually leadership in any given company. And in particular, whether that leadership sees technology as a cost or an investment. If they see it as a cost, then it's a necessary evil. I will buy the bare minimum software I need to run my business, and that's it. We're done. And honestly, that's probably 95% of the companies I deal with. And truthfully, within Turner, that's the same thing. There's people like that. It's brutal. We're trying to wait for them to retire. But when you see it as an investment, then it becomes a business strategy. It's what it also leads to, hopefully, you got to pair that with also structure and process to identify, test, evaluate solutions in a methodical way to determine whether they really do add business value. And if not, then you move on. And if you have all that you think very strategically, then it becomes an operational benefit. It helps you drive your business, grow your business, position yourself for the future. But that's if you don't have that mentality, that leadership, again, you can surmount it, but it's really difficult. You need that, and that's probably one of the hardest things I run into is when we're dealing with leadership. That's just that they get that short tactical sort of perspective and not that long-term strategic view.
You know, James, before Cory answers, let me ask you something. So Turner doesn't get the benefit of like Mark Andreessen where he goes, yo, if you want to work here, some of our core values are we believe that technology is an inherent benefit to what we're doing. You're in a business where some of these guys been there 40 years. They weren't around. They were already at the company when they didn't even have an email address yet. So what is Turner doing? Are they trying to convince those guys? They're like, nah, we're just going to move on. These are our core values. And we're going to just, as the next generation comes in.
There is definitely a generational gap. There's no doubt about it. I mean, even with COVID we're fortunate with COVID in one respect that it accelerated our leadership's sort of exposure and use of technology. You know, again, but still we got people that, they print out Excel spreadsheets and hand mark them up. And then I had a guy, actually a few months ago, one of our leaders, I gave him an Excel spreadsheet electronic, emailed it to him. He printed it out. It was 87 pages. He hand marked it up and he mailed it to me. He sent it. He goes, because I was looking for. I was like a week later. I was like, hey, whatever happened with that thing I sent you? Oh, he says I mailed it to you. I said I didn't see it in my email. He goes, no, I mailed it to you.
But he might have FedExed it.
And then I said I haven't seen it. He goes, oh boy, that was my only copy. I was like, those are now isolated pockets. Those aren't as common. We're getting, people, but it was sort of fun to watch as they started using Teams. So that actually helped a lot. That they sort of created that awareness, and they were now sort of a little bit more immersed, touching the technology, recognizing that this is really valuable. That helped out, accelerated probably by 5 years, sort of our willingness to adopt. So it penetrated the consciousness of leadership. Yeah.
Now, Cory, look, you're also obviously we had blueprints, we got into CAD, we're getting into BIM modeling, and it's really changing the game, right? But is architecture, if we look at the adoption life cycle, what would you say architecture is? Are they visionaries? Are they early? Are they late? Or are they laggards? Like, what about the industry? Where do you see architecture within this paradigm? And what are then the hindrances to adopting technology?
I think you hit on something really early about the architectural market, which is we're subject to everything that goes on around us. And if we look at the opportunities we have moving forward with technology, they're founded in this idea that it's not just the architect designing a set of drawings that get built and then the operators come in, right? I think that segmentation of the entire life cycle of a building is one of the biggest hindrances, because then you're piecemealing together expertise, and then all of the artifacts that come out of that expertise get lost throughout the life cycle. And so when we look at the opportunity for technology, when we're looking at everything that's been talked about with data, the most important part of that is consistency and then persistence of the information so that it becomes leverageable. And so as an architect, one of the biggest hindrances for us is, well, all of the pro forma, all the feasibility that comes out before of that, we're not part of that. That's logistics, that's planning. And you guys have your little bucket, work in that bucket, give us a good set of drawings so Jim can build it. And once they build it, as long as our warranties are signed off on, you guys get out of the way, because now we got O&M guys and they're better at this than you guys are. If we look to EPC, if we look to industrial architecture, the idea of procuring...
Wait, what was the acronym again?
Engineer, procure, commission is how contracts are done for nuclear power plants or oil refineries, right?
Cool.
Because if something goes wrong, something really goes wrong. But in commercial buildings, it's, spec a couple of things, somebody will put it in, we'll worry about dealing with it later. And I think when we start to think about the entire life cycle of that project, including the consumer experience, including all of the apps that get built on it, all of the systems that are part of infrastructure, then we start to have a holistic system that is about the benefit of our customers. And that's our clients, and that's your clients. And
how is that penetrating, though, your architectural firm? Like the people who are responsible for now creating sort of that image and then actually implementing it. What do you see from those around you?
Absolutely. I think that's where the communication and collaboration becomes most important. So, we're expanding into advisory services, into commissioning, because you have to. If you're going to guarantee the quality of your work, then you've got to stand behind it, and you've got to partner with people long term. And so that includes when we look at BIM, typically BIM is just a set of drawings that we produce, that we stamp, and then we go, hey, I'm going to give you a model, Jim, and you can't do anything with it. It's reference only because that's what the legal liability says, and you need to build your own. But when we build trust, when we look at those
takes any liability, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the important part. If we're really going to leverage technology, then we have to start to leverage that full life cycle of where the data provides value. And so where we have to expand our services and we have to expand our partnerships and then the ownership of the products that we deliver.
So you're sort of becoming a tech influencer from the architectural perspective. And obviously, you know, they're coming to the architect sort of up front, right, and understanding the planning of it. So you actually have that opportunity to sort of influence how the rest of the project will go.
But I will say, not to be sort of jaded or cynical, but you know, I was involved in rolling out building information modeling, 3D modeling to Turner and starting 15 years ago. And I'm still amazed to this day. We're still grappling with the same issues. We don't lack the tools for transformation. It's not a technological problem. It's just, you know, we still have legal concerns, liability, you know, just distrust. You know, the architect, again, like you alluded to, you know, they give us a 3D model, but then they say you essentially can't use it, rely upon it, can't use it for anything for estimating. Right? That segmentation, that siloization, it's absolutely still there, and we haven't broken that down. And that's a huge. I think it's that legacy thinking to some extent. Too many lawyers. For sure.
You know, it's funny. You guys in the room are mostly technologists, but you're on the construction and development side. The fact that they're sitting so close to each other is already breaking down barriers, you know, where the architect and contra are sitting next to each other. So, you know, big round of applause for that. So, you know, I feel like in a room, we're talking to the forward-thinking technologists, right, at our conference here today. So what do you think is actually going right in the tech sector? Who is actually sharing data, and are you seeing results, you know, based on that? Let's talk about some of the positive things. You know, we understand what sort of some of these issues are. So where are you seeing the sharing actually occurring, and are you seeing a difference? Don't take too long to respond, guys.
It's hard to find the positive.
Yeah. No, I mean, I you know, I don't necessarily say good, but if we look at the big tech companies, there's obviously an understanding of what data does and how it allows you to curate your efforts, your branding, your services to population, right? That's really just targeted marketing.
So what data are you seeing that where you were like, aha, this is going to help me design? What did you see? What did a digital marketer come to you with analytics and you're like, wow, that's fresh because that's better than a broker telling me I need to do X, Y, Z? Have you seen any of that yet?
Not at that level. I think when we start looking at data-driven design, it's much more focused on GIS data, demographics, looking at the population. How do you serve? What is the marketplace? And what can that marketplace afford in terms of what's buildable?
So you're sort of you're still the algorithm. Like the algo isn't giving you data that's then giving you insights that you can react to. You're getting it, but you have to be now the one that's translating that information still.
Correct. And at times we're working very closely with our clients. So when we look at like major sports venues, stuff like that, looking at seat pricing, looking at the mix, right? No different with multifamily, looking at the unit mix, right? They've got their algorithms. We're trying to build in some of that experience. You know, we've got 80 years of experience working in different markets. We do have some data on the back end that we're benchmarking against. And so the ability to overlap that with the financial pro forma gives us a little bit more opportunity into the built physical space versus the financial performance and projections for the performance of those projects.
Professor, what about you? What are you seeing as some of the actual data coming to you that's impacting the way in which you have operated in the past?
You know, I'll differentiate between call it the packaged, sanitized data versus the working data. So, you know, we certainly moved all the deliverables that are required. You know, providing a budget to an owner or progress monitoring, whatever. That's gotten much better. The cloud solutions, they're more collaborative. We're publishing there. It's more accessible. You can start to do some analytics.
So first is that the information sharing, whether it's mobile first, desktop based, is there for anyone in any moment, and you've seen an impact on that.
For, again, our typical contractual traditional deliverables. So that's great. It's making, again, the data more accessible, and you can analyze it.
And single source,
and
right?
Collaborative, right?
Every player knows.
The thing that I would love to see next is the working data. Because the architect having access to our estimators on a real-time basis, getting cost of things as they're designing. They know the cost of that thing they're designing. Rather, because an estimate, we get a set of drawings, say 2, 3, 4 months to develop the drawings. They get sort of launched, or the model, launched over the fence. Takes us 4, 6, 8 weeks to provide an estimate. Then it goes back. We're always over budget, of course. Then they have to redesign. And it's a crazy, wasteful process. It's super inefficient, takes way too long. Like if you actually had real-time data, if we could access the model as it's being developed, giving feedback, constructability feedback, so that then what you're producing is something that's buildable, it's within budget, but that requires getting behind the literal and figurative firewalls of these companies, the trust, which is hard. You know, they trust. It's okay that you're going to give the contractor access. They're not going to like immediately say you can't design that because it's too expensive. You know, that's what I'd love to see, that access to that data. And you see hints of it here and there, but and I think we're going in that direction. We got the tools for it. Again, I don't think we lack the technologies for transformation. That's not the issue. It's that sort of culture, it's the mindset. But I think that's a really interesting place that we want to go.
Yeah, you know, we're seeing that paradigm in other industries, right? Which is what you're stating is like, we're not recreating the wheel in tech. We're in construction technology and architectural technology. We're seeing it in, you know, retail-based or office-based where they have this workflow, but it's a human factor, which is what you had stated in the beginning. And that's an old school paradigm that we're still trying to resolve, right? So how do you think you create that?
I mean, I think it's interesting because if you look at it, those are like the biggest myths from the development and from the owner side is, well, one, you have to go to bid because there's no other way, right? This is old school capitalism. You have to go to bid because they're going to be competitive, and that's how we get the best price. Well, not really. The way you get the best price is by understanding what you build, you know. And when we sit with a contractor, when we sit with a sub, right? I am a chief technology officer, but I'm a glorified hammer swinger. I actually come from construction. I went to trade school for carpentry cabinet making and owned a design build firm. So what we look at is how do you build something, and that changes. You know, if he's got a sub in California that can do something, they're not going to have the same facility, the same capability in Texas or in Missouri. And so the more we build to the capability of the people who are going to do the job, the better quality we get, the lower the price is. And so I think that's some of these myths that we have to break down, which is just collaboration and communication.
And that bid mentality, from like general contractor standpoint, I would say 99% of our work, we lump sum bid to trades. We lump sum bid. There's a growing trend of bringing the trades in early, because that's the other big thing, right? They know the work, let's be honest. I mean, general contractors deludes themselves in believing they're as smart as every trade contractor out there, and they can tell the trade.
Oh, yeah, they know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
We know how to do your job.
But the reality is the trade obviously knows their work best. They should inform that design process, but they should come on board early. We're starting to see that shift, you know, and potentially changing the contract forms for more open book with trades, treating them more as partners than just a widget that we just get low price. And then because then they get in, they're in the 3D models. They're helping the architect, literally working in the model, sharing data from their perspective, because they're ultimately going to build the work. That's the reality. We manage that, but they build the work. So that's another piece of the puzzle. That whole engaging all the stakeholders, the architects, the engineers, the contractor, and the trade contractors, and engaging them using the technologies and platforms to enable better data sharing and collaboration.
And which are the ones that are dope, that are working? Like, what are the actual platforms that you think have created a solution for the two of you to break down this distrust and is actually working? What do you see as, you know, because the whole point of this is that it has to work, otherwise we just stick with our old paradigm. So what do you see as a sort of a shift? What was one that you've seen?
I think Eric's trying to talk about SoFi, maybe.
No, not yet, not yet. You know, no. You know what? Honestly, no. I was thinking more cloud. Like, wasn't that one of the greatest things where it was like
still cloud, but there's sort of spot solutions for things. We couldn't. There's no. If you're alluding to like a platform, a common platform, we have. You know, we can share Revit files and we can share documents in the cloud and we can share. So you can. There's opportunities to share and there's technologies to share, but there's not a common lingua franca. That's sort of a platform.
You guys out there, you hear that? That means that solution isn't there. That's why you're here, to find out what we need to provide and to create it for them.
It's an opportunity.
What's that?
It's an opportunity.
Yeah. And how about yourself? I mean, are you seeing, is it, you know, your BIM software has changed the game somewhat. Are you seeing any other technology platforms and or apps that have really changed the way you're operating?
I think we heard throughout the day today that every building's a snowflake, right? At the end of the day, the real opportunity for us is to find out what the metrics are, what the parameters are, what the information is that's important to that specific project, and then you build the framework around it, right? It's no different than any other model type, right? You're modeling what's important to that project, to that client, to the contractor, or to the subcontractor, and then you build the platforms. Really, the hard part is that most platforms, when we talk about any type of authoring, whether it be BIM or design modeling, if we look at any of the facilities management platforms, they're proprietary. And so it comes back down to what is the common data that's
so
most
they're
important.
proprietary. They're not doing open APIs so that we're actually collecting this information and getting better.
So even within Turner, forget about connecting stakeholders. Even with Turner, it's a struggle. We've certainly gotten away from the era of the big enterprise solutions, the big platforms, the one size fits all. That's gone. Like everybody, the Autodesk and all these companies that want you to be in their ecosystem, and that's it. We've gone to much more fragmented, specialized apps, specialized solutions. They solve this one problem. Whether it's processing subcontractor payments or helping scheduling or progress monitoring. That's actually a bit of a problem, because what's happening, though, as we use these spot solutions, they don't necessarily stitch together. They're not talking. Our data, which we're the largest contractor in the U.S., we think actually our data is there's IP there. There's value in all that data. But now actually it's getting fragmented. It's in all these different solutions, and we have access to them. We theoretically own the data, but so we're sort of interested in there's going to be a rise of sort of the super app that starts to it's specialized, but it starts to add capabilities. You see, like what is Uber's doing over in England? They're now adding the ability to sort of manage all your travel, the hotel and everything. You don't book hotel, but they're just managing that as adding capabilities beyond just rides. So I think we got to get to that, because again, it's great. We've broken up the old era, but it's causing its own problems as we get to these specialized solutions.
So let's talk about a case study, and that is what Cory was alluding to. There's a stadium called SoFi, right? Which technically I had to look up, stands for social finance, which is that an oxymoron or not, but it's fine. How did you guys, and it's both your firms work together to do that. Did you guys get to work on it together, where you were trying to determine the technologies between each other?
Not directly, and I'll say this was actually delivered as a traditional project. It went out to bid. It was done as a GMP, but we had gone in early on knowing that we couldn't use traditional methods to do certain aspects of the building. The roof is 73,000 unique panels, right? And so drawing every single one of them. What's that?
It's moving?
No. It's just the panels themselves have different perforation panels. They're different shapes to create the exterior form. And you can't do that in drawings. Imagine sending 73,000 drawings of panels that are 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, little triangles, different angles, and sending that to your local AHJ to review. Not going to happen. So we actually just went directly with a subcontractor that we knew very well, that we've worked with in the past.
And then pass them off.
We actually ended up going to the State Board of California, asking them, hey, this is what we're doing. We have IP. We got a patent for digitally sealing and authenticating and validating digital files. Stamped. We didn't even stamp the drawings. We never sent we sent the DWGs to them, but we ended up just sending the G code, the XYZ coordinates that go into the CNC machine, and that's what we stamped and validated. And then
is it an NFT?
It can be.
Wow.
Our platform's based on blockchain now. But yeah, it was.
Well, I was going to say, let's back up a little bit. How did that happen? I'm going to go back to, like I said before, if the obstacle in any given firm is a leader, on a project basis, the owner is that leader.
Right.
That CEO. And that owner was the one that set that vision, that said very clearly, we will apply innovation to the design and construction process.
Who was the principal? This bank?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Stan Kroenke.
What is it?
Stan Kroenke,
okay.
the owner of the Rams.
And he came in and he said, we're going to apply tech. So he believed in the Andreessen philosophy right from the get-go, right?
Which is huge, because, again, Turner or HKS, we could theoretically voluntarily choose to do something.
Off.
And, and if we're lucky enough to both want to do it, we'll do stuff. But when the owner is saying, look, this is the vision, this is what I want, this is my expectations, you will do this, and you will find ways to innovate that whole process, that was set the stage. It was a foundation of what then came after.
Very cool. So I think what is also, it sounds to me that, so it was people-based, and that's why you got into this tech this technology that works so well on this stadium, right? But what are you guys doing in-house? If you're seeing something changing the game, are you guys working with that tech? Are you trying to incubate it? Are you guys trying to create your own throughout the process? Like, how are your firms looking at the future of technology and how you're getting involved?
I think it's a little bit of all of that, right? Where we are doing proprietary stuff in-house, where we see gaps in the industry and stuff that's really business-focused, things that are particular to the way HKS has operated for 80 years, right? And so you have to customize some of the work. But then there's times where the way we work doesn't make sense, so we have to evolve. And so looking for opportunities to bring in off-the-shelf systems. And so I think there's a combination of piloting, of really exploring opportunities. And then I think the hard part is that gray space between integrations between platforms, change in process. Change management with people is probably that's the most difficult part. But
you're big enough to experiment, no? You can take a small project that you're doing in Buenos Aires and say, let's try it out, no?
We try to.
Yeah, but again, you could try stuff, but can you deploy broadly within large companies? That's the challenge with large companies. Is then because an innovation isn't an innovation until it's in the hands of a person and then they use it to change how they do work and it delivers that value. So we can play with stuff all day long, but the next step is, okay, I'm going to roll this out to 10,000 people at Turner, 50 different offices, and get them to now choose. They have to change what they've been doing for 10 years and suddenly use this entirely new tool. I mean, just the communication, the education, the training, the follow. Like that's hard. That's the hard part of innovation. But you have to do it because otherwise you're just playing with things in a vacuum. And you don't affect real change until you get into the hands of people. And it's a lot of work. That's a huge challenge.
So have you done that so far? Give me an example of one where you went 50 different offices, 10,000 employees, and it actually rolled out and was like worked.
So luckily, my department, maybe I'm justifying myself, my existence, but my department exists for that reason. We formed the innovation department because we're getting a little tired of this haphazard way of things bubbling up and 10 people all over the country playing with things and nobody talking to each other. So we put the department together. We also put a structure and a process in place. We do with startups. We have a formal process with startups where we will talk to, my rule of thumb is we'll talk to anyone at least once. We talk to them, we see if there's anything interesting. We have a database of 300-400 startups. We determine if they're worthwhile, we'll test it, we'll pilot it, validate, yes, this is an interesting solution that actually can change how we do work, and then we'll incubate. We'll actually have an incubator approach.
You have an incubator program.
Yeah. It's a pain in the ass, but yeah, we do have one. Because again,
don't tell anyone.
Keep it on
the DL.
That last step again is fine. We got something really interesting, but then how do you deploy that? We're working right now. Actually, we're in the midst of one right now. There was a startup out of Israel called Versatile Solutions, and I met them probably 4 years ago. And they have this really interesting hardware. It's a hardware device. It's a sensor package that you place under the hook of a crane. It's a hook under a hook, but it's got a sensor package. It can tell you where the crane is at any given moment, X, Y, and Z, the durations of movement. It's got artificial intelligence. It's got a camera, so it can tell you. It automatically interprets what the crane is lifting, rebar, formwork. It'll tell you. It's automated. It's awesome. You get data every 2 seconds on productivity. You can reduce and use that to reduce overtime, get the crane off a job, save tens of thousands of dollars. Like, to me, when I first met them, I was like, this is a no-brainer. Like, this is right at the heart of a builder. We should have this. But man, introducing that into the company, you think it'd be a no-brainer. It's hard. It's like you go to like a senior executive on a project, and you're like, look, this is gonna be great. And they're like, yeah, I don't want to spend the money on that. I want to buy iPads instead. Can we just buy iPads? Because it's easier, It's like, no, this is really going to change your work. How do you know that? Can you prove it?
But inherently, you're saying crane is a waste on some of these large projects.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is a problem you've had forever that needs a solution.
Is the heartbeat of a job. It's a metronome. It sets the pace of a job, the use of that crane, because it's moving materials, equipment.
So it's right on the critical path.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can make that use better, you make the whole job better. So it's literally been 4 years of introducing it to the company, finding a pilot project. Literally, we document the case study. We document the time saved, the money saved. We then try to grow it virally to other projects, and then we do broad communication. So we're in the midst of that right now, and and it's hard work, but it's working. We're starting to get traction. People are hearing there's a competitiveness. People hear this project used this thing and it got great results, so someone else wants to use it. And it's finally, after 4 years, you can see that hockey stick of it's starting to take off, which is great. And then at that point, we back off. Once the traction momentum, then my department will sort of back up and say, look, it's off and running. It's fine.
You know what, Cory, I have a different question for you, which I think is super pertinent to your business. If technology moves in like a Nike swoosh, but how long does the development project take from when the guy came into the office to when you're actually seeing it done? What are you guys doing in the design side to prepare yourself for the changes that inherently will occur in the future so that you can either plug and play or make these choices and these decisions? How are you even thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, a design project can be anywhere from a year to 5 years, right, on these mega projects. And so that's a long time to see technology evolve. I think we do our best to try to create systems where we know that something might be replaced. So when we talk about it, we always talk about space save, right? So you're thinking through where something might change in mechanical systems, looking at any of the way we're doing cabling, right? The way that we're setting up all of that infrastructure that is eventually going to be something different, right? The way that you do any of your electrical or data closets, right? Looking at how we do shafts. Is there ways that we can actually start to plan for something that maybe a
doesn't
little
even
bit
exist
different?
yet, that you're going to be responsible for understanding, right?
That's a big part. The other aspect of this that I think is really important, what we're trying to push towards is some of those partnerships, right? When we start to look at a kind of electrification, when we look at smart buildings, when we look at systems that aren't really developed, right, or they're not as sophisticated as they need to be today, we've got to start planning for those. And if you look at the way a system is typically engineered, it's done through an engineering company. They lay stuff out based on best practices and spacing of what's commercially available. So all my Wi-Fi points need to be X feet apart, right? Well, it doesn't really get engineered until the procurement company comes on and they go through. So why aren't we thinking about that? Why aren't we starting to partner earlier?
With integrators, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are on the forefront, right?
That's right. And I think there's certain aspects from at least the development and owner side where we can get some of the system providers on board earlier. There's a ton of value that comes into place, and that really is focused on the implementation of technology earlier. So that's your automated building systems. It's any of your technology tied to P over E, all of your intelligence systems as we move forward. There needs to be more thought given into the 20-year out, 15-year out. How do we make sure that this is capable of taking on any of those, let's say, modifications or any of those developments in those systems that isn't just, 5 years out, we're going to just rip it out, reinstall, right? Because we know that's not the efficient way or the sustainable way to do it.
100%. Let me ask you, is it all right if I open it up to some questions? All right, guys, before, as Dave Chappelle show there's that button, wrap it up, we've got 3 minutes and 45 seconds. And I want to just be clear that we have two of the guys at the absolute bleeding cutting edge that if you have technology or have any interest in it, that they are the ones you have to convince to implement. So if you guys have questions out there, this is your moment where you guys have their attention. Me, I got their email addresses and now I'm going to harass them because they're in the city, but the rest of you don't. So does anyone have any questions for these guys about, and stand up and just project because you don't have a mic.
Sure. So I guess my question, kind of like where you're going with it, where's operations, the operators, facility operators, in your collaboration story?
So from our side, I'd love to have them in the room. We do have some clients who come to us. This is typically your owner-operators. It's the universities. It's some of our development partners they know they're going to own that property, so they bring their teams on early, and then we can cater to them. We can build out the systems. We can start building the BIM so that it is set up for FM BIM, right? So that any of the information needed is readily available, that all of the systems are tagged properly, and then we pass that information, right, setting up that model so that it's handed off properly. But I'd honestly, it's from our side, it's probably 20% of our projects. We get that level of involvement from the operation side. Typically, that's somebody else is going to operate it after, and they're not on board. They're not part of the stakeholder group helping us build the specifications and requirements.
Yeah, one of the hot topics actually nowadays is I think it's referred to as the digital twin, right? It's it's an old concept repackaged a bit, but the idea of, okay, you have this 3D model that contains all the information through the sort of life cycle of the project from design construction, and then hand it over at the end, an as-built representation of the facility, theoretically the facility. But it's the funny thing is we've done this a few times, and we have owners literally pay us extra. We had a job where they paid us $1 million to create that digital twin. But when you hand it to the actual facilities person who's got the keys on the belt, they're like, "What the hell am I going to do with this?" Like, they got their 2D. They run back and want their 2D drawings. So there's also a gap. The facilities people, tend to be older, more senior. There's not younger generation coming in. So there's also that gap. There's the owner at the CEO of that company might think this is great. But at the end of the day, are you building something that's actually going to be used and useful to the people who are operating that facility? And that's a challenge.
It's interesting. In the security business, right, we see the innovation on the resi side, right? It's not the commercial and access control. You got to see it like when Nest came out with thermostats. Everyone's like, oh, that's fresh. Now I want to use it at my office, right? So it's funny that the facilities guys wouldn't be right in the room because they're sort of the ones that are on the ground floor as to seeing how their occupants and how people are operating those assets that actually work. So it's interesting that they're not a player in the room just yet on these designs, because they're the ones who see it first.
Well, that's also, though, the opportunity we're looking at, and we've been talking about this, in terms of like IoT, censoring the building, during construction, so that later we can use that data, literally how people use the facility, the energy performance, that we can use that to then better understand and predict that use of the building, because there's a broken learning cycle where the architect and you have that 1 to 5 year duration between design, where the architect designs something, it's sort of a hypothesis about how that building will be used, but then by the time it's built, the owner's business may have completely changed, how they use the space. We have a whole division called the Turner Interiors that a lot of their work comes in after we've completed a building and the owner moves in and says, I don't like this. so we renovate. We're like, so the idea is, okay, can we actually use the building as a sort of a platform, censor it, monitor, learn how that building's used, and then inform the design after, so the learning cycle is completed, because it's broken.
The last thing just before we go, since we are now social media obsessed and socially influenced, do you guys want to plug any of your Insta or any of your Turner whatever or any of that stuff so these guys can find you? You don't have to.
I just really suck at using I meant to post about this on Instagram, and I just forgot.
Maybe someone out there has, but who are they tagging is my point. How are they going to know?
I've forgotten. I always feel self-serving. Hey, come see me at this event. So I'm sorry.
How about you? Do you at least have some TikTok, some social media here? What are we doing?
I did the same. My marketing team reached out 2 days ago and said, make sure you post. And I'm like, oh, I forgot to do that. I think come talk to the company. I think, we're both big companies that are easy to find on the internet.
Yeah, don't find you, but find someone else.
Have conversations.
Well, listen, I am social media forward, so you guys can find me at _Brody. I also have a podcast, Real Tech Talk. I also have a show on The Real Deal called The Blueprint, so please come along. I'm here. And guys, I just think that you guys are at the, I think that the room needs to understand who we're dealing with, and you guys are absolutely incredible in what you're doing. I appreciate the time that I've gotten to have with you, so thank you so much, for joining us here, man. All right. I was right on my time, right? All right, yeah, we have more time if you guys got questions. You were first. Yeah, get on up.
How do you see it? So what you guys did cover is the project managers from working with the architects and then the construction company. What kind of software would you say is lacking, or are the communication gaps that you see today with project management software?
So a little more specific on that communication channel. How are you getting these PMs to understand and be able to get information back and forth with the firms?
I don't know that. I think the technology is there for managing that process. I think or from my opinion, one of the things that's missing is the decision-making tree and what are the consequences of those decisions, right? So when we talk about censoring, when we talk about building something that's future-proof, that goes out in value engineering immediately. Like, well, no, we don't need to worry about that right now. And then you come back 2 years later, well, you didn't give me something prepared for. No, you took it out. So being able to go back to those decisions that have real consequences, right? Because capital expense is something that people are trying to drive down all of the time, but it's at the cost of either retrofitting in the future or higher operating expenses. And so understanding those trade-offs would be a huge part of enhancing project management and even early GC and trade involvement.
You can thank us for value engineering. We're the ones that do it.
That's why he's got Turner Reno, though. He's like, you know
every
what? We'll make
budget's
the decision later.
over budget. There's always that's the first thing you do. We call it different names, but it's just cutting. From project management, again, I like sort of the silos within Turner. We have it's the dominant platform. It's not mandated per se, but it's grown to become dominant. 90% of our projects is Procore. We have that's standard for us at this point, pretty much.
Why? Why Procore?
That's interesting. We used to, again, as a company, we used to have the very corporate sort of that enterprise. Here's the one solution. You must use that solution. And we were until 6-7 years ago, there was always that mentality. Procore was interesting to watch. I watched it because it was curious how it grew, but for us it was very viral. And truthfully, it was a generational thing. It was just a lot. It had just a better user experience, user interface. The other solutions were really tired and old.
They were actually architecture of it was cool.
Well, also, what the brilliant thing was the API. They had an API. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to trap you in my ecosystem, they said, look, I want to connect to all these other solutions that are out there.
Breaking on, right? They were able to do that.
So they built the ecosystem around them, which then created that bit of a network effect and also a competitive advantage that everybody wanted to tie to Procore. And so that's how there was a couple of different things. So and within Turner, it was younger people just liked it. It was a fresher, more modern interface. Thought it was easier for the fat-fingered sort of superintendent. And so that's it. And it just literally. Nobody in leadership, I don't think they ever knew what was happening, but at there was a groundswell where just one office was telling another office, we love this, another office was, and that was it. And now, 5 years later, it's now on 90% of our projects.
Wild. So there you go, Procore. Anyone else?
Well, I'm not saying it's a great solution, but I'm sure the others will come. But it's just interesting that again it sort of broke that old mentality that sort of the top down. I'm going to manage.
Oh, I agree with you. They came for me to invest, and I was like, I got a server in the corner, and I didn't get it. And you were 100% right.
What we'd like to see is again more when we go to the partner level is pushing that a little bit of upstream to the architects using that or the owners. I mean, I know Procore has a roadmap to go to owners as well, but we have some participation from other stakeholders, but it's primarily our tool.
Procore is awesome, but it's based I'm getting deep here, but it's based on the construction cost, and architects get a very small fee relative to construction costs, so we can't actually afford Procore. So that's why we wouldn't use it. I'd love to use it,
but they pay for it and bring you on as a user, right? And they charge you.
Ideally.
Typically, they're not involved when we're starting.
I will say, fortunately for us, our business model is different. We get our fee based on the total volume of the revenue of the job. That does give us a little more flexibility to invest and do R&D, try different things. With an architect's business model, it's just things are tighter. They're tighter, and owners, I think, unfortunately, are still trying to cut architects' fees. I think it's absolutely short-sighted. They shouldn't, but it happens. So we have a little more flexibility, and we're fortunate that way.
Got it. Anything else? You had a question?
Yeah, I think anybody who's doing development right now is experiencing the rising costs. They're outrageous right now. So if you're going to innovate commercial real estate development, part of that is reducing costs, right? And we've discovered, I work with an owner developer of office space, and we've discovered that parking garages can be a huge waste because per space, if you don't plan exactly right, you're wasting a lot of money building those parking garages for high rises. Are you guys working a lot now on these new developments with smart parking? And if so, kind of what's the one that's seeming to work best?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, we've run across a couple companies that have automated parking, right? Actually, parking garages they're a money loser, right? You don't. building, it's actually, so you want to minimize that space as much as possible. So we see some interesting ones. I don't know if we've actually deployed on a project, the automated, fully automated, robotic, I forget the names.
It didn't work well.
Yeah. There's
Not yet.
some that claim they're better, they're now getting better. I don't know, maybe so. But it's where you need to go. If you're you got to minimize that space use as much as possible, because it's such a lot, it's a money loser for everyone.
Right, when you go further down, the costs go way up
building
for
owner,
parking, right?
Typical building owners don't charge for parking, so it's just, it's immediate cost, and you lose money. So, but again, just haven't seen that take root. There's not anything that's sort of game changing.
Yeah, we've been deploying it, especially in larger projects, some of the automated systems, and again, that's designing the space to accommodate the systems that we're partnering with. And we've done it with a couple of vendors. The other way that we've been approaching this has actually been going back to the city and trying to get variances, right? When we're talking about larger communities, and what we're doing a lot of transit-oriented design, especially in Atlanta, some of the urban areas that have high traffic areas, going back to the city and trying to convince them that let's not worry about the ratios of parking. Let's actually evolve to accommodate your development plans. If we're putting in new transit stops, if we're looking at how we improve walkability, right, the ground level amenities of your spaces, of your cities, of new developments, and you want investors, then let's look at revamping the code so that it actually meets the needs of the future, right, and addresses the things we're trying to do in cities.
We have a couple tech clients that, I mean, for projects that are, these are big projects that probably won't be built for another 5, maybe even 10 years, but they're looking at they're reducing the parking because they're already planning for autonomous cars, right? And actually starting to think about that.
Not drone parking yet? They're not designing drone parking?
But actually starting to think about that. That again, the technologies get better, it's going to be more prevalent, and anticipate. So I think it's more of an intellectual exercise, but they're already talking, the really forward-thinking ones are thinking that far ahead.
Which means you can also design them like elevators, right? You know, when the cars are coming in, when the people get picked up, and then have them elsewhere, right? And that would all further reduce the space based on those studies. Anyone else have any questions? Are we still good on time, or anything else? Let's go.
As far as communicating design from the designer to the contractor, I'm sure you're using two-dimensional PDF files. What else do you use? Revit model? But that's correct. That's the information of the not the contractor. Right?
So the question was, what visual representations and how are you transferring that information between architect and contractor? Two-dimensional PDFs, or are you going somewhere else?
Most of the time it's going to be dictated by contract. So if we're doing design build, then it's a shared model, right? If we're doing, sometimes when we've got CM at risk contracts, right, where we have early involvement with trades, then there will be more of a collaborative environment. We do a little bit of IPD here and there, right? So that's a shared model. We're always providing a model to the contractor whenever they're on board in a project. It's just what are the stipulations that are allowed legally, and so
but the language is still the same,
yeah,
right?
Contract language, 99.9 is the 2D is the contract deliverable. That's it. The model is a nice to have. SoFi, that's where SoFi was different, right? It became a contract deliverable. That's actually one of those very rare times we've ever seen that. That's where we need to go, where an owner says, I want that as a contract. The model will be a contract deliverable. Then that changes everything.
Yeah. Wow, very cool. So in that space, what are some of those? Are they axonometric drawings that get submitted? Are they actual models that get built so you could see what the steps are required in order to execute it?
We did, it's, again, the goal for us is always to provide the right information and communicate as much as possible to help, right? We're a partner in getting something built. The client, the contractor, the architect, we all have the same thing in mind, which is to get the best building built for the client. We've gone down to, we did a project up here on Union Square, the Cooper Union building many, many years ago in a past life, and we were actually modeling out and 3D printing formwork for some of the columns. Is that the
glass facade one?
Metal facade up front.
Oh, no, there's a bubble in that one office space that was like all of these interlocking glass. All right, forget, not that one. All right, different one. There you go.
But I think the most important part for us is that partnership, right? If there's a question, if we can't figure something out, we've got to 2D drawings aren't always the best representation. So doesn't Axon help? And if it doesn't, then how do we build models? How do we build 3D assets that actually get down to what they need to communicate, what the subs
And you
need?
can't ask Alexa yet. She's not giving you the answers you need, right? Anyone else? Any other questions? Sure. Shoot. Just speak up, though. We got to hear you. So who's the responsible party, right? Is that what you're saying? Who should be the innovator?
Whoever gets there first. Honestly,
Well, I think
because that's where we're actually seeing it as a business opportunity. I
Right.
think architects are also seeing it as a business opportunity. Who's going to be there first to again capture, either put the hardware in place to generate the data, capture the data, analyze the data. We think it's a business opportunity. We sell it as a service to the owner. Say, look, we put these contractors building the building. We'll sensor everything. We'll turn them off, and if you want to pay us, we'll turn them on. We'll get the data. We'll analyze what you predict, and then for us, it's like Turner. We never leave the building technically, right? They always come to us for data. Then when they have the next project, so everybody's, and architects think the same. Everybody's sort of thinking about it, because there is an opportunity there. It honestly is. It's right now. It's sort of blue ocean.
Oh, very cool. That's pretty cool. Anyone else? We're not forcing you. I'm just saying you got these incredible people here. You don't have to ask a question. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for coming through. We really appreciate you.